Hello there, Pokemon Masters! Welcome to the wonderful world of Pokemon. My name is Birdkeeper Toby, your Pokemon professor for this series, and you know, one of my favorite areas of research is evolution. How do Pokemon evolve from each other? And I'm not talking about how they evolve via level up or with an evolutionary item like a stone. No, I'm talking about evolution in the way it works here in our world. Small genetic changes being passed down over hundreds or thousands of generations in a process called natural selection. This has taken life from a single-celled organism into the variety of different species you see on the planet today. Now, my most popular video on this channel is all about this idea. Evolution, common ancestry, a phylogenetic tree of Pokemon life, discussing 3 Pokemon, Squirtle, Lapras, and the fossil Tortuga. However, for this 12-part series I want to upscale. I'm not just going to talk about 3 Pokemon, no, I'm going to talk about all 807 currently known species of Pokemon, and then, when new species of Pokemon get discovered, I'll be talking about them as well. The thing is, we can't just follow our own tree of life. We know that all Pokemon evolved from the common ancestor Mew, except Mew isn't a single-celled organism in the same way that life evolved on our planet. No, it's a complex form, like a cat. Okay, we also know that there are other things in the world of Pokemon, like dragons, spirits, and legendary Pokemon, Ultra Beasts. Clearly, we're going to have to do a little bit of Pokemon theorizing in here as well. So join me, won't you, to learn a little bit about Pokemon, a little bit about evolution, and maybe a little bit about our own world that we live on.
Let's start with some of the earliest types of creatures to appear in our world. Mollusks. Mollusks come in a variety of shapes and sizes and often, though not exclusively, are marine in nature. They are invertebrates, meaning they have no spines, and in the Kanto region, both Cloyster and Omastar are within that classification, or phylum. Throughout the Pokemon world, these mollusks will tend to appear as either shelled or non-shelled, and of course Cloyster and Omastar are both shelled. We also know that these are some of the oldest creatures in the Pokemon world, and the animals they're based off some of the oldest creatures in our own world, giving rise to much of modern day life. In the Pokemon world, this can be seen in the Pokemon that it is so fitting that we have started off with, the origin to everything, our Lord and Savior, Helix. In this case, we're talking about Omastar, and throughout the whole series, I will be referencing the final evolution of the Pokemon only because Omastar is just a grown-up Omanyte. And it is known that the reason that it became extinct is because Omastar's shell grew too big and heavy, meaning it could no longer chase and prey on Shelder, which means Cloyster also existed around the same time. Another type of creature that are actually older than mollusks are Cnidaria, and in the Kanto region there is one of these as well. Tentacruel. Based on a jellyfish, Tentacruel and its pre-evolution Tentacruel are known as the Zubats of the sea. They have been found all over the Pokemon world. And that in itself says an awful lot about the amount of time that they've been here. They've had so much time to stretch out and cover the seas of the Pokemon planet. And in our world, jellyfishes are possibly some of the oldest multi-organ creatures. They represent the beginning of complex life forms. Interestingly though, we do know the origin of Pokemon life. The Pokemon Mew, an animal that is a multi-organ creature. Appearing like a cat, it is said to contain the DNA of all living Pokemon today, suggesting the ancestry of all Pokemon comes back to this point. However, it is a life form is far more complex than the single-celled organisms that life on our planet evolved from. So what gives here? Well, potentially the Pokemon that we call Mew today is different to the Pokemon called Mew in the ancient times. This creature has evolved to be far more complex and look like other modern day life forms. However, I actually have a different theory that I'm going to delve into in a later episode. For now though, we can go to the Pokemon tree and see that we have Mew at the base, Cnidaria as the first branch stretching off the tree, and if you go further along, you have mollusks. And while much of Pokemon life came from the sea and stayed there, like Seaking, which is just a fish and it remained in the oceans, others like amphibians and arthropods emerged from the oceans in all their various shapes and sizes. Arthropods in the ancient Pokemon world may have descended from the fossil that we have found for a Pokemon called Kabutops. It was an avid hunter in the ancient Pokemon world, and some of the life forms that may have spread from it are the crab Pokemon Kingler, the cicada Parasect, the beetle Pinsir, the bee Pokemon Beedrill, and the moth Pokemon Venomoth. Additionally, and very likely a close living relative of Venomoth as well, is Butterfree. On our planet, moths and butterflies are incredibly closely related, and this can also be seen in a Pokemon theory. This theory suggests that Butterfree and Venomoth swapped evolutionary lines, with Butterfree looking a heck of a lot like Venonat, the pre-evolution for Venomoth. Its eyes, mouth, and color scheme all fit that of Butterfree, while the head crest on Caterpie looks an awful lot like that of Venomoth's, as well as Venomoths sharing Metapod's big dopey eyes. Whether this Pokemon theory is true or not, not, one thing is for sure, Butterfree and Venomoth are very closely related. And while I'm on the subject, Butterfree's evolutionary line is a good way to observe and think about evolution in the Pokemon world. Butterfree, of course, based off of the butterfly in the real world, transforms from a cocoon, which transforms from a caterpillar. In the real world, this process is called metamorphosis, and that word, metamorphosis, is actually a better representation of how Pokemon evolution happens. When a Pokemon evolution happens, like Krabby into Kingler, that evolution is more like a metamorphosis, the process that caterpillars go through in our world to become butterflies. Anyway, speaking of Kingler, it, like all the bug Pokemon that we've just mentioned, are all invertebrates, meaning they don't have spines. In fact, their skeletons are known as exoskeletons, meaning they are on the outside of their body as protective armor, and it seems very likely that they may have all descended from Kabutops. That said, moving up the evolutionary tree, skeletons started to take hold. Sea King, as I said, remained in the oceans, and that is the first known bony fish. Some fish are not bony, but we will get onto that a little bit later in this series. For now, life started to leave the oceans in a couple of different varieties, one of which are the amphibians. In the Kanto region, the only one to talk about is Poliwrath, and don't let the gloves deceive you. This frog is based off of the glass frog, an animal with transparent skin, and the tadpoles match Poliwag's to a T. The swirl on Poliwag's belly, that is the intestines of the frog. And a tadpole becoming a frog is yet another example of metamorphosis in our world. There is another Pokemon in Kanto that you may think to be a frog, Bulbasaur. But Bulbasaur and its evolutionary line ending in Venusaur are Pokemon based off of reptiles, specifically lizards. These sit across the evolutionary tree from amphibians in a group known as Reptilia. And while they are based on lizards, there is actually a dinosaur known as Bulbasaurus. Dinosaurs are also, of course, reptiles of the ancient world, but Bulbasaurus was not named after Bulbasaur. While they do have incredibly similar names, it was named for its big bulbous nose, and Saurus because it's a dinosaur. That's how we know, of course, that Venusaur is a reptile, not an amphibian. Reptilia also come in a variety of other different forms, like snakes, turtles, and tortoises, and these can be seen in Arbok, Lapras, and Blastoise. Blastoise and Lapras I have discussed thoroughly before, and they even have a common ancestor in the Pokemon world, but why don't I save that for another part? Arbok too is another great example of evolution in action. You see, Arbok has different patterns on its hood depending on which regions you find it in. It's kind of like a predecessor to Alolan forms, and these variants have proven successful in their different regions based on what works. Perhaps specific designs allow it to intimidate prey, allowing it to survive and reproduce, and other designs may prove better at finding a mate. For whatever reason, these pattern variants get passed down over different generations, and it means that the Arboks all have slightly different versions depending on what region you find it in. And this is evolution at work. Now, there's one new section to Reptilia that exists in the world of Pokemon that doesn't exist in the real world, and these are Draconis Dragons, and these too come in a variety of different shapes. We can take a look at some of these more serpent-like ones. For example, Dragonite and its pre-evolutions, and Gyarados too may be some kind of sea serpent. Now, you might consider Gyarados to be more like a fish because of its pre-evolution Magikarp, but as we've already discussed, the way that evolution works in the Pokemon world is more akin to metamorphosis. Magikarp becoming Gyarados, Magikarp is essentially the larva stage, it is the baby stage, and Gyarados is the final form. Not only that, it ties into our own world mythology of dragons and the story of the carp jumping over the dragon's gate. And while you might be thinking that Gyarados is not a dragon type, there are several reasons as to why it could still be a dragon in the world of Pokemon. Number one, it's used by Lance, an expert in dragon Pokemon. Just sorta seems like a point in his favor, as well as being located in the Dragon's Den. But on top of that, we can't really use Pokemon types in this series to distinguish the different types of species. For example, both Drapion and Gliscor from Generation 4 are clearly related. They both have a lot of similar traits, with Drapion being a poison type and Gliscor having the poison heal ability. They are both scorpion-like in nature, and I will discuss them further in the Generation 4 video, however, they do not share typings. As well as that, Alolan variants of their original Kanto counterparts usually have wildly different typings from their originals. And yet these Pokemon are clearly related to the original versions as well as being the exact same type of animal, so we can't distinguish what type of animal they are based on their types. Oh, and as a side note, another way that you might determine a creature's species in the real world is its ability to breed with other animals. If they can't reproduce similar, then they're probably not closely related. However, in the Pokemon world, egg groups work a little bit differently. I suspect and have had Pokemon theories that suggest that breeding does not work the same way. And when you can have a Skitty breed with a Wailord, you know that they're not the same species of Pokemon. So yes, we have to take this alternative, more investigative approach. There is also a Pokemon theory that suggests, just like Venomoth and Butterfree, that Gyarados and and Dragonite also had their evolutionary line swapped over, with Magikarp looking a tad more like Dragonite, although I don't really see it myself, and Gyarados being a natural fit to the end of the Dragonair Dratini line. With Magikarp and Dragonite sharing a more distinct colour scheme, and again the legend of Magikarp hopping over the fence becoming a dragon would make sense for it to become a dragon type, and Gyarados being a natural final progression to Dratini and Dragonair, certainly in shape. So you can see that these Pokemon are related, although I don't buy that theory 100%. There is another creature in Kanto that is also closely related to the dragons, and it's a wyvern, and this is the fossil of the Pokemon Aerodactyl. Now, wyverns in legend and myth are traditionally a little bit different to dragons. The best way to distinguish them from their dragon brethren are the fact that their arms are part of their wings. Anyway, dragons and wyverns share a ton of similarities, and again, Aerodactyl is a Pokemon used by Lance, the Dragon Master, so Aerodactyl, very likely a dragon / wyvern of some sort. Maybe even the ancestor to all dragons. You could certainly see how those claws at the end of its wing might become redundant, and over the years it might develop a new set of arms. This is over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And you would end up with a Pokemon more like Charizard. And yes, Charizard, you too are a dragon. Again, being used by Lance, but also it does have a Mega Evolution, which is Dragon type. It's certainly no lizard. It breathes fire and flies. This is what you think of when you think about dragons. It's also possible that the way it flies and has fire igniting out of its tail, and the way it can breathe fire, is that it has lungs filled with methane. Somewhere in its biology, the ability to convert oxygen into methane. It is a gas both very flammable, as well as it is more buoyant than air, which means that Charizard's body would be easier to lift, allowing it to fly gracefully and carry its own weight. As well as that, methane is toxic, meaning it can't stay in the body or else it might poison itself, and that would make sense as to why Charizard has evolved a tail that expels flames. When the flame goes out, Charizard will die, not because there's no flame there, but rather because it's no longer expelling that deadly methane poisonous gas. Now, evolving from ancient reptiles and ancient lizards are the birds. That's right, modern day birds you see, they actually evolved and are the closest living relatives to the dinosaurs. And yes, there are dinosaurs in the Pokemon world, I will get to that too, I guess some of them survived. But you can see it in avian life like Fearow and Pidgeot, which have evolved with raptor-like qualities. Dodrio is an odd type of bird that evolved alongside these, but is definitely a bird. Golduck and Farfetch'd are less raptor-like. They are a type of bird known as, well, a duck. And in the fossil record of Pokemon, there is a creature that connects these Pokemon to reptiles, but again, we will save that for later. So we've looked at the origin of Pokemon life in Kanto. Cnidaria, mollusks, bony fish, amphibians, reptiles, and avian life. There is only one other type of life form that we can really discuss in this video, and that is mammalian life, you and I, where we have come from. But before that, let's talk about our mystery Pokemon of the day.
Now, with every generation of Pokemon, there's always one creature that absolutely boggles the mind and perplexes Pokemon theorists like myself. Whenever I see these evolutionary trees, these are the ones that truly confuse us, and in this part, I want to talk about the Pokemon Slowpoke. What is it? Is it a salamander, an amphibian that can lose its own tail and regrow it? We know Slowpoke tails are sold. What about a hippo? It's aquatic. Or a sloth? It's slow. I honestly wasn't sure until researching for this project. Maybe you have your best guesses. Let me know in the comments below, and we'll check in a little bit later on.
So, mammals are vertebrates. They are animals with hair or fur and mammary glands, which in the females of a species secrete milk for the young to drink. This includes, of course, humans, you and I, although humans in the world of Pokemon did not evolve from Pokemon, and I will explain that a lot later on in this series, but for now, let's take a look at those human-like Pokemon. Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Machamp, who likely share a common ancestor with many of the ape or simian Pokemon, and those include Primate, and a ton of other Pokemon we'll get to later. These Pokemon seem to have evolved similarly to how ape life and humans have evolved in our world, but definitely humans did not evolve from Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Machamp. I will talk about that a little bit later on. Other closely related mammals come in the form of Rodentia. Pokemon like Raticate and its Alolan form, Pikachu, or in this case Raichu also with an Alolan form, and again, the Alolan variants seem to be very closely related. They are a sort of transitional form between the Pokemon as they are currently and what they could become. This isn't to say that Alolan, Raticate, or Raichu are going to suddenly transform one day. Again, that would be metamorphosis. No, it is to say that their offspring will continue to look ever more different from the original Raticate and Raichu from Kanto, and eventually Eventually, they will just be totally different species of Pokemon altogether. Again, this is just like Arbok and its hood patterns. Eventually, it'll look like a totally different kind of snake. Further along in Mammalia are the Pokemon based off of marsupials, like the kangaroo Kangaskhan, and the almost guaranteed to be related Marowak and its Alolan form. I'm sure you heard a number of Pokemon theories as to why these Pokemon are related, that a Cubone is just an abandoned baby Kangaskhan, and this theory seems to have even more credence with the SOS chaining in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, where Cubones can call Kangaskhan for help. It seems very likely that these Pokemon are super related. Marsupials are mostly known for their pouches and carrying their young, although not all marsupials have this. Now, Dugtrio and its Alolan form are based off of moles, and there's nothing too much more to add here other than Alolan Dugtrio looks stupid. Similarly, Sandslash and its Alolan form, which doesn't look stupid, are also diggers. They are based off of pangolins, other mammals. Hypno is a creepy tapir, and Nidoking and Nidoqueen are based off of rhinos, although if you were looking just at its previous evolutions, you might be inclined to think that they're based off of rabbits. However, ideally we are looking at the final evolutions here, so yes, they are based off of rhinos. Now, there's a possibility here that Nidoqueen is not something from nature, but rather Nidoqueen is a failed cloning attempt of Nidoking. This seen in the fact that it's not just some regular gender variant like other Pokemon, but rather it is its own species of Pokemon, a species of Pokemon that cannot breed. Nidoqueen and its pre-evolved form Nidorina, they can't breed, even though most other Pokemon can unless they are legendaries or genderless Pokemon. As well as this, its shiny form has the same colorings as Nidoking, as well as being highly associated with Team Rocket's leader Giovanni, a person who is expertly known and renowned for his research into cloning. It's possible that he tested on Nidoking first and that Nidorina is not a natural Pokemon, but there's not really enough evidence to back up that Pokemon theory, so for now we'll just assume that it's based off a rhino and very closely related to Nidoking. Essentially the same Pokemon. Now, all of these Pokemon I've just mentioned are based off of ungulates, which is a massive group of Mammalia. This also includes bulls like Tauros and horses like Rapidash, and weirdly, a branch of life that has returned to the sea. These include sea lions and dugongs, the creature that Dugong is based off of, and the creature that Slowpoke and its evolution Slowbro are based off of. If you guessed the extinct sea manatee called Promasticide, then you were right, but seriously, if you guessed that, you googled it first. Look at this thing. This thing is a Slowpoke, and it makes so much sense. And interestingly, these types of creatures, these types of Pokemon have returned to the ocean, and they are not fish. They are not based off of fish. Whales are the same. We'll talk about those a little bit later on in the series. No, they are also mammals. Back on land though, carnivorans began to evolve, and they consist of cats, dogs, wolves, and foxes, and so much more. In the Pokemon world, this is Persian, and it's a lowland variant. They are cats. Arcanine, of course, is a dog. It's a canine. Snorlax, one of my favorite Pokemon ever, is a bear, and between the dogs and cats is a species new to the Pokemon world, much like dragons. Between them are these kinds of fox-cat-dog creatures, like Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon, a sort of hybrid of all the different traits of these similarly related animals. And that makes sense because Eevee is the poster child for evolution. It is a conglomeration of different traits from different creatures, and its evolutions are no different. So here we get a branch of life that doesn't exist in the real world. That's kind of like plant Pokemon or ghosts. Speaking of which, there is so much in the way of ghost life and plant life in the Kanto region, like Vileplume or Gengar. As well as that, there's legendary Pokemon, like the legendary birds Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno. Or what about man-made Pokemon, like the legend Mewtwo? Well, all that is going to have to wait for future parts. For now, though, let's hop across the border and take a look at Johto.
But that, of course, will have to wait until the next part, where we explore the Johto region and the creatures that live there, some of which have evolved from creatures that are usually native to Kanto, like Blissey or Crobat. Now, this 12-part series has been my biggest undertaking on the channel ever, so please, now more than ever, share this out and engage with it. Like, comment, get involved. What do you think? Put on your Pokemon researcher hats. You are all Pokemon experts like me. So hi, Pokemon Masters.
This is only part 1 of 12, and there is so much to talk about in the story of Pokemon life. This is usually the part where I'd thank my patrons, and while I do thank them sincerely for allowing me to move to double uploads every single week, the funds for this series were raised by the community on Twitch streams and through Kickstarter donations, so thank you so much to all of them. Make sure to hit the little bell next to the subscribe button, and new episodes of this series are coming out every other week.